Hey guys, it's Kevin again. This is my review for Justified Season 6, Episode 5, Sounding. And wow, another fantastic episode, guys. Seriously, Justified is just putting out amazing episode after amazing episode. Of course, it's their final season, but wow, the stuff that happened in this episode, I did not expect that ending. And I've never felt worse for Boyd and Ava, really. I feel so bad for Boyd after that ending. I'll talk about why, but another fantastic episode, and I really like where the rest of the season is headed, and I could definitely see where I think the show's gonna end. But one of the things I like that Justify is doing is that they are taking their time with things. For example, apparently somebody thought they were gonna kill off Art tonight. Um, from from Raylan and Art's conversation last week, someone thought they were going to kill off Art, and Art's not even in this episode. And I like that they're taking their time with things because it keeps us more invested into the show. It keeps us more and more and more and more each week, and I love that about Justified. They do a really good job with doing that, and let's just get into this episode because it was another fantastic episode. So, we start off once again with Boyd and Ava. Seriously, we can't stop focusing on just Boyd and Ava. So Boyd tells Ava that pot used to grow so tall in Harlan back in the day they called it Christmas tree dope, and Ava says they were going to leave Harlan and now he wants to be a farmer, and he says an entrepreneur is what he wants to be. She says he told her that Harlan had no future, but he says this could pull it off life support, and says they just need to get ahead of Avery Markham. And of course, they have that whole plan to rob Avery Markham, and she just wants to take the cash and run, and he reminds her that she wanted to stay. But she says she didn't know he was going to poke the bear and pitch a tent outside his den, and he says for her to clean up the guest room so he can put a guard on her 24/7. So he gets a call from Carl and says he needs to get people to pull it off and get people to only sell to him. And they are stuck in a roadblock, and Ava says she's fine. They send them on the way, and Boyd wishes them luck finding their guest of honor. And I thought that was a really good scene overall. So one cop walks back to Raylan and says Ava seemed very on edge, and Raylan thanks the cop and tells him he can wrap it up. Of course, Raylan has no idea this whole thing is going on with Ava and Boyd. So Tim asks what he thinks, and Raylan tells him to go find Albert Ficus before this blows up. And Katherine has her grandkids over and says if they don't act right, she'll lock them in the closet. And Wynn comes in and asks about the kids. And she says Laurel's nanny had an immigration emergency. She introduces Thomas and Fee to Wynn, and he says they seem nice. She takes him outside and asks where they are. And he says he has a guy at Ficus's house and says if the cops show up to move or to talk to him, they'll know she was right. So Catherine says she likes Ava, and it would be, and I like that she said this, that she likes Ava and it'd be a shame to have to kill her. And that just makes me think, okay, so I guess she bonded with Ava because Wynn told her to, so she doesn't have to kill her. So that's really interesting. She says she wasn't worried about a rat since Grady went to jail, and Boyd then wakes to Ava cooking breakfast for him. It's a really happy scene, actually, because it's one of the first times, one of the few times, as I said, that we've seen Boyd and Ava happy. But they're back in Harlan County, and he's over the moon that she made him biscuits and gravy. But again, she's kind of doing this because she's covering up things, and plus I think she feels bad for him. So she's covering up things and she feels bad, so that's why she did this. She dishes up scrambled eggs, also made pancakes. He said she's in a better mood this morning. She says she decided if they can have the life they dreamed of in Harlan County, she's in. And he tells her to sit and eat, but she says she has an early shift at the salon. And he says she doesn't need to work, but she says she likes to keep busy. And she tells him she's got the cooking bug and is going to make him fried chicken and sweet potatoes. And he asks her to sit by him for a minute before she goes and pulls out her engagement ring, and he says it's been in his pocket long enough. He slides it on his finger, says it still fits. She kisses him, then says she'll see him tonight, and he says she will. And it just reminds us that, yeah, they never actually got married. So, even though they act like a married couple, he tucks into more breakfast as she drives off. She drives and stresses and calls Raylan, and he asks if she's okay, and she says she's losing her mind, which is, I mean, it's understandable. I mean, everything that's going on with Boyd. She says any second Catherine's going to call Boyd, and he's going to put a bullet in her head, and he says Raylan and Tim have gone to take care of Ficus, because, Catherine knows what's going on. So she's very worried that Catherine is going to tell Boyd what happens, and she knows what's going to happen if Catherine tells Boyd he's going to kill her. So she says she gave them information. That's what she gets, and she wants to walk. And he says he needs solid intel that he can put her in with sec. And she asks for cash and says he can pay her off and let her go. And he says no and demands they meet in person. And she says junkyard 30 minutes. She throws her phone out the window in frustration. She's extremely frustrated. And Rachel and Tim are in Lexington and discuss that Ficus lives with his parents. He tells her not to stop and points out a maroon truck, and she says it looks like he's been parked there for hours. So they conclude that someone's watching the Ficus place, and Mikey and Wynn play Scrabble, and Wynn says that a plex is not a word, but Mikey uses it in a sentence, and Wynn just sighs, and the guy waiting outside the Ficus place calls to say the guy's on the move, and he tells him to follow and call when he lands, and Mikey says Wynn looked perplexed, and Raylan's waiting on Ava at the junkyard and is annoyed because she's late. He calls and asks the marshals to trace her phone. They tell him it's on the side of the road. He curses, and Raylan calls Boyd and asks for a favor on the lowdown. And not Boyd, his friend Bob. And I like Bob's character overall. He says it's Ava Crowder. Bob asks if that's Ava Randolph from high school, and he says that girl can make a dog break its chains. And he asks him to check out a place. And I like that Raylan just says, yeah, she's pretty. I like that he says that. Um, he asks him to check out a place she sometimes goes to when things are in trouble, and she has gone to see Limehouse. And I have to say, one of the things that I love what Justified does is, again, just like last week, they reuse old characters. Limehouse is a character we've seen since season 3, and he's still there, which I'm surprised that he's still there. But yeah, he's still there because he's there when we need him. Just like Loretta, he's there when we need her. Loretta's there when we need her, and just like Dickie, he's there when we need to see him. And I like that Justified does that because it really just shows that, certain people don't go away in your life, and Limehouse is one of those people. So she says she needs another car, and he says he's not a car salesman, and she asks who she's running from, Boyd, the law, or both, and he says a car will help her with Boyd, but if it's the law, she needs new papers, and says running will get her caught. And I have to say, I really like this bonding between Limehouse and Ava, because most times it's Boyd and Limehouse. Boyd goes to see Limehouse every now and again, and they have interactions, but it was Ava for once, which is interesting to see, and I like seeing that overall. I thought that was actually really well done. I definitely enjoyed seeing those scenes with Limehouse and Ava. I really enjoyed it. So he says she'll bring up the law there to hassle his black ass. She says it's the last time she'll ever ask him for help, and he asks what she'll do for him. She has money, but he says it's not enough. She shows him the ring, and he says that's not enough. She says she can get more money. He asks how much more, and she says enough to solve problems and then some. She asks Limehouse if he knows what Boyd has been up to, and she says there's a large chunk of it hidden away. She says she doesn't want Boyd or anyone after her because, of course, she knows what's going to happen. So she wants to disappear and just be left alone. And Limehouse is waving his hat, and Errol comes out. It was cool to see Errol again as well. And he tells her to tell Errol where to get the money, and he'll take her to a garage. She says she'll tell him where the cash is after she gets the car, and Limehouse says it wouldn't be wise to play him. And then Boyd meets up with Carl, who tells him it's hard getting people to turn away Avery. And Carl says they've got to get into their fault, and Boyd says there's an ADIT that dead ends at 187 yards from there. So Boyd says they're dealing with black damp, and then asks Pig how he knows about that. And he says he did some mining summers growing up. And of course, as we know, Boyd did mining. He worked in a mine and everything. So I like that this kind of brought him back to that. So Boyd says it chokes you like you're drowning with no water inside. And he says that he has a guy that can help. He says last time he saw the guy, he threatened to fill him in full of buckshot. And Choo Choo and Seabass tell Ty that these hillbillies are turning down money, and basically Choo Choo says Blondie is slimming from the register, and Ty says that all good bartenders skim, and he asks how much she's taking, and Choo Choo says up $40 a night. She comes over and Choo Choo asks for skim milk, and Ty tells her to go on. Ty says each property they fail to acquire costs them tens of millions, and says to forget the $40 GD the woman is skimming, and he says they can just kill people who won't sell. But Ty is talking about, this is not going to work. It's not going to work, and it's a terrible idea because most have kin that will inherit, and Avery comes in, and Ty goes to talk to him, and basically Seabass says maybe the bartender is the one interfering in their sales, and Choo Choo asks if he thinks so, and Seabass says no, and Ty tells Markham it's got to be Boyd or Raylan screwing up their plans, which it is. It's Boyd that's screwing up their plan, obviously, because Boyd's trying to get their money and everything, and I like that they are not stupid. That's one of the things I love about Justified is that no one is stupid. They're not like the crows. They're not dumb. They are very smart. They know that either Boyd or Raylan is betraying them. They just don't know who it is right now. And I like Avery says, because it's really true. Each is different and will require different solutions. He says they seem to know which properties they're targeting, and Ty says he knows who to talk about that. And Avery tells him to deal with the leaks in their ship, and basically Ty asks to speak freely, but Avery says he's made it clear what he expects, and that's that. And Ty says yes, sir, and goes. And Boyd goes to see Zacharak and brings along a bottle of whiskey, and the guy has a rifle and tells Boyd that he should remember what he threatened to do last time. And Boyd says he needs his particular expertise and asks if they can let the past fade away and start anew. So Zacharak, how do you pronounce that? Zachariah, not Zacharak. Zachariah takes the bottle and grins. He goes in, shuts the door while Boyd says he just wants to talk to him. And he tells Carl that he's Ava's uncle and is still holding it against him how bad his brother Bowman treated Ava. And she's in the car with Errol, and I think Bowman is her husband, her old husband. I think that's who he's talking about. So she's in the car with Errol, and she says he's lucky he survived being shot by Limehouse, and she says she gets the car, which I remember I was very surprised that Errol lived. So she says she gets the car first, then she'll tell him. He says he has to make sure Limehouse gets his money. They're in downtown, and Bob spots them driving by. He calls Ray and says he followed her out of Noble, then leapfrogged ahead of them. He says to make sure he doesn't alert them, and Bob says he was born for this shit. Wynn and Mikey come to a hotel room where Ficus is, and he asks if they're with Cindy. And Wynn asks if he's there to meet a hooker, and Wynn says they just need to talk. And he asks what, and he says Ava Crowder. And when he said that, I'm like, okay, definitely they are against Boyd. Definitely against Boyd, and because they have a completely different plan than Boyd. So Boyd tosses a rock at Zachariah's door and holds his hands up. He says he wants to show him something on his phone, and he says it's a wire transfer for 10K to his account. And he says Ava killing Bowman should have ameliorated the situation time, and says he can hit the button and he can have 10K just to hear him out. He has what manner of work he wants to do, and Boyd says the only manner you live for. And Ficus says all he did was tell the truth. He says he couldn't take the idea of Ava being gone forever because of what he did. And when asked if it's a crisis of conscience, and he says yeah. And when asked what Mikey thinks, and he says it's nonsense. And he says Ava didn't press charges against him. When asked if he's not in jail, and he says he doesn't know, but he lost his job and pension, and maybe she thought that was enough. Of course, Ficus is of course the guy that got her, in jail and everything, and was the one that said that she abused him. And he says maybe Ava was so relieved he did the right thing and she forgave him. And Wynn says that doesn't work for them. He doesn't really buy that. He thinks that there's much more behind it, and I do have to agree, it's not exactly believable. So Ficus sighs and asks what they want him to say, and says he'll say what they want. And Mikey pulls out a cattle prod, and Wynn says he used to have tasers, but then they made them trackable, and cattle prods are much better. So he tells Ficus last chance and begs him to stop, and basically Tim and Rachel watch on video. They plan the fire alarm. They tell him to tell the truth and it will stop, and Mikey shocks him again and again. He begs him to make it stop. Wynn tells him not to be a hero. He says he loved Dave and wanted her to stop suffering. Wynn says if the sorry should knew anything, he would have said by now. And it's kind of a funny scene, honestly. Even though he's being tortured, it's kind of funny. Mikey asks they should kill him, but Wynn says he won't say anything. He says he'll let him be, and maybe he can still get it up for Cindy. So I love that it was just like, we don't know what to do with him, but we're just gonna let him be with Cindy. So they leave, and Rachel asks if he's alright, and he says she said she'd stop them if they get rough. She says she knew he could take it, and Tim says he shouldn't have stabbed himself and blamed it on Ava. And Rachel says he's in the clear now. And again, I really love this Rachel-Tim interaction. I definitely do. They just work really good together, and I like that we're getting a lot more of that. So Tim fist bumps him, and he says he took it like a man, and says, Uncle Sam, thanks you for your cooperation. And Ava then says that they need a shovel since it's buried. So he says they had a shovel at Noble's, and she says he's the one that changed the deal. They pull over at the hardware store, and Ava says she'll be a minute, but Errol insists on going in with her. And she says hi to Mike and asks him to show Errol where the shovels are, and says she needs to go to the bathroom, but he won't let her out of her sight. And Raylan pulls up behind Bob, then gets in with him. He says he figured they'd take them down when they came out, and Raylan says he needs Bob to go in and says Errol can't know he was there. He says Ava is his CI and he needs to get her home, calm to protect her in his case. Because, of course, Ava's his informant. So he says to go and take Errol out. He says he thinks he means dead, but Raylan says take him outside. And I thought that was really funny when Errol thought he thought he meant dead, but he really meant take him outside. So he goes into the back and takes Ava out, and he tells Bob to use his badge and balls and take care of it. And Bob says he has balls like death stares, and Ava says she needs to pee and is going to have to do it in his car. And he says he can buy another with the money. She grabs a shovel, and he takes it. Bob's Mossy's up to the front counter looking nervous. He asks Errol if that's his car, and he asks his name, and Errol blows him off. Bob says he's Constable Bob Sweeney. He says he has an outstanding warrant for his arrest, and Errol refuses to go with him. And Bob says they can do this the hard way or the easy way. And Errol asks if he's going to shoot him and says he can call the National Guard and says he's not going with him. Bob is threatening to tase him, then he does right in the nuts, and Raylan says when he wakes up to apologize, says it was a mistake. He hauls Ava out, says he can't wait to hear what comes out of her mouth, and Zachariah goes with Boyd to an abandoned bridge. He says they weaken the coal tunnels, and Zachariah talks about proximity vents and says they used ones like that in the Statue of Liberty. And Boyd tells him to get his ass to work, and Ava tells Raylan everything, and he asks what she was thinking this morning, and asks if she has a plan in cash, and he asks if she has a new ID, and Ava says she didn't think she just ran, and he says he's the only reason she's not back in prison or dead at Boyd's hands. And I like that Ava's realizing that really Raylan is the one that's helping her out here. And one of these other knuckleheads, she asks for her phone back. He asks if she listened to one word. She says she needs to go home and cook dinner for Boyd so she doesn't have to explain. But he says he'd like to yell at her some more. And I thought that was a good scene overall. So Zachariah is yelling at all of them for the way they're cutting and says they can't have sparks because the methane. He tells them to start again, and Zachariah sees sparks again and yells at them to get out. And Carl and Earl are blown backwards into a creek, and the tool goes flying too. Zachariah says they won't make it through. He climbs up, says they have to let it vent for a few hours. Zachariah says there are rotted supporters and all kinds of things down there when he goes deep. And Calhoun and his hooker Caprice are at his office, and he pays her for time and includes a little cash, a little extra. And Seabass is then waiting outside and asks if she's his friend. And Calhoun says she could be his friend too, and offers her number. And he talks, but Seabass shushes him and tells him to sit. And Choo Choo's standing there menacingly. And I thought that they were like going to kill Calhoun or something. And basically, he asks Choo Choo if he remembers that SEER exercise they learned in Jimito survival and evasion, resistance, and escape. And basically, Seabass says they got used to dealing with interrogation using that method. And he tells Calhoun to nod if he understands, and he nods. And Seabass says there was one African guy that just wouldn't talk, and says they use the peritonal strike over and over, and he finally talked after all that unnecessary pain. And Calhoun is trying to talk, but Seabass is sushing him, and he says Calhoun is the only other person who knew which properties he wanted, but now there's someone else. He asks who's doing it, how they know. Calhoun says he honestly doesn't know, and he tells Mundo to give him a starter tap, and he punches Calhoun, who goes down hard, and basically we don't know if he's alive or not. And basically, Choo Choo's not sure if he's alive, and Choo Choo's checking him, and then says, and he says that he is still alive, and he says CS wanted him to hit like a girl. He should have done it, but with him it's Amtrak, and I thought that was really funny. So, then we get to the final scene here, and this was very shocking. This final scene, I was not expecting this, and I really like the direction they're heading with this because it was really surprising. So Raylan follows Ava home and says he says he has to know she won't run. And she says him being there is making her unsafe. And he says her besides Boyd is the safest place for her. And she says all he cares about is his case, and that's why he's there. And Ava asks what's in it for him. And he says finishing the job and says they're going to finish it together. And he asks what she wants, and she says she wants 100K. And he says to aim for 50K. She says she wants out of the country, no with sec, and he says he will find her a place where she will be safe and can be happy and start over. And he asks, isn't that what she wants? He says there's going to be a place in hell for a man that breaks a promise to a woman. And she asks if he's going to take care of her like when he did when she took Bowman out. Because, of course, and I love that they reference that because in Season 1, of course, he did help her out. And I think that Ava's remembering that Raylan really did help her out a lot with that. He really did. In fact, they had a relationship there for a while. But then, of course, when Nona came into the picture and all of that eventually just went away. But they did have that brief relationship in Season 1. So I like that she referenced that. So surprisingly, she steps close and kisses him. I want you guys to remember that. She kissed him. He did not kiss her. And her phone is buzzing. She says it's Boyd. And sorry, guys. She says he should be back soon. And Raylan said she should go. And he says he was just thinking he'd stick around for a bit. She rolls her eyes, and you can see the look on her face. She knows that she just did something wrong. She knows that she just betrayed Boyd, and She knows what she did is wrong, and that's how the episode ends. And wow, guys, what an episode this was. Seriously, so much happened. Well, not like, I wouldn't say a lot happened in this episode. This was definitely more of a building episode, but it's really building to a lot of stuff. I mean, there is no way that Boyd's gonna let Raylan live now. There's no way. If he finds out that Raylan, that Ava kissed Raylan, he's not gonna let him live. I know that because Boyd's gonna kill anyone that comes in interference with Ava. Um, Ava now, I know she's gonna prolong hiding this secret from Boyd because she knows that if she does tell Boyd what's going on, he's gonna kill Raylan. He's not gonna be happy. But Ava and Raylan, very interesting seeing what's gonna happen there. Is Ava gonna stay with Raylan, go behind Boyd's back? Is she gonna be with Boyd and secretly date Raylan on the side? I definitely see something happening between them, definitely, and I think that it's gonna be really interesting to see. Um, Calhoun, Choo Choo, and Seabass. I'm very interested in seeing, is Calhoun dead? I mean, Choo Choo claims that he is, but I don't know if that's true. We're gonna see what happens there. Um, I like Zachariah. I like his character overall. That's very interesting to see what's gonna happen there. Boyd and Boyd and all of them, not Boyd, Wynn and Ficus. I'm very interested in seeing what's going to happen there as well. And then, of course, how does Errol fit into all this? I'm very interested in seeing what's going to happen there. But overall, guys, this was a very good episode. I definitely really enjoyed it. I thought this was, as usual, a great episode. Really loving this. Of course, I'm loving this season. I'll see you guys in my next video, which will be my review for The Flash. So I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.